This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Vernon Howard, CEO and founder at Hallo. Hallo is an online events platform to build authentic relationships with diverse candidates. Hallo's versatile platform helps teams and passionate employees connect with candidates in natural ways. Vernon, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to talk to you guys.
You bet. So what was your background before founding Hallo? What did you do before this?
Right. I think my background ties directly into why I started the company. Most of our career paths, they don't take this like linear approach where it's just like a straightforward path. And mine certainly was not. I grew up in Rochester, New York, which is, it's not the cool part of New York. It's not New York City. Definitely a tech sector though, in my opinion. Graduated at 16, had no idea what I wanted to do. I was interested in technology and math, of course, but ended up going to college at VCU to study computer information systems. And at graduation, I'm like, what do I do now? Right? Like I got through college, like what's the next kind of mountain to climb? And it was like getting a job. I think the biggest thing I noticed when I went to Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, was it was an awesome school, but a number of the companies that I was like very much interested in pursuing a career at, they didn't attend my school for whatever reason, right? And I think that limited the amount of information access I had to understand what those companies were looking for in a hire, and then also have that network to activate a potential, job application or like an inbound at these companies. So fortunately, one company that came that kind of stood out to me was Capital One, and they initially pitched me. I'm like, this is a bank. I wanted to work in like a deeper technical role like Facebook or Google. And they were like, we're going to be, it's 2012. They're like, we're going to be the first digital bank. We're just doing all these things with mobile apps, and like we're just spinning up really quickly. And digital banks are like, it's a natural thing now, right? But back then that wasn't a thing. Started working at Capital One. I helped build out their first native mobile banking application. I wanted to do something more technical. Rotated over to being a hacker for Capital One, which was like, you built the app, now break it. And then I kind of got bored in that role, and I wanted to do something else, like in the financial sector, just deep finance. And I started trading my bonus. And this guy who was managing most of the derivatives trading floor was he was like, I hear you're trading your bonus. You just got out of the college rotational program. Like what, for lack of a better term, he's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, you know what, do you want to come sit on the trading floor? And I was like, yeah. And I actually moved my role over to risk and finance technology and was helping the traders book trades in this platform called Murex for derivatives. So interesting career.
Great. So what led you to start work in this particular space with Hallo?
Yeah, I think this story, which like as long-winded as it is, it would send me around the country, Capital One would, to talk to students. You're just like, one, Vern's a minority. Two, he didn't go to an Ivy League, right? His background to get to where he is today doesn't match what we usually see when we go out to recruit, which was mostly Ivy League schools for Capital One as well. And like, we want you to talk to other students so we can find more people like you, because for lack of a better term, you're running laps around all of the top talent that we usually go out to shepherd in. And I was pitching this story, and it sounds great now. But I noticed, like, it sounds great now. Anyone can connect the dots going, backwards. It's like, okay, great. Yeah, I did this and I did this. And it's like, I'm like, oh, most of this is based on luck, right? Like I met the right person. I got this right introduction. I got all these things. And I was like, what if I eliminated a portion of the luck out of the equation by letting students make real-time connections with a lot of these companies so they could build community around gathering information on how to get a job at Google and who's the right person to talk to. And if they don't come to my school, how do I interact with this person for the student? But also on the company side, I knew they just lacked the understanding of like how to educate these students at scale and then how to actually attract these students at scale. So like, if I could build a marketplace around here, around this interaction of student, university, and company, I'd probably have something big here that people would pay for. And I started building it out in 2017 early, and just, again, as luck would have it, I had the opportunity to meet Garrett Camp, the co-founder of Uber, and he funded the company and moved me to San Francisco in a pretty short timeline.
Well, great. So you see a lot of startups and investors in this sector. What's your advice for people investing in this space? What do you tell them to do before they write that check?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing in this space is like, I started Hallo in 2017 initially, and online events weren't even a thing, right? And I was, it was like pulling teeth, pitching investors about, I was like, digital is going to be a thing. Digital experiences are going to be a thing. And now, I've been super fortunate to see a real-time technology shift due to COVID, where digital experiences and online communities are booming, right? We saw recently Hopin raise a massive amount of funding to build an online community. And I think our online event platform, I think the biggest thing we're seeing is that investors, one, they have to be very open to the fact that online communities and digital communities are here to stay, but also in our space, which we're more so focused on, not so much recruiting, but more so education, which is a bit more sensitive. They have to be very understanding of the fact that the educational system is inherently broken. And we're seeing the effects of this now, where it's all tied to socioeconomic status. And if you can pay for the right school, you have the right connections, you go to the right school and you get the best job. But that's the 1 percentile, right? So we really focus on investors who see the world the way we do and want to build around that space.
Then what's your advice for people that are running startups in this sector? What do you tell them to do before they go out to raise funding for it?
Yeah, I think, I have some friends who are building in this sector. I think online event communities are super attractive right now. And I think for us, when we were initially building this out, I talked to a VC yesterday and I was like, online event communities are great. I think we see some people building full businesses around them. And I think for us, it's a feature. And I say that as one of the people on the product team. I think online event communities are a feature set in a larger toolkit to build out along a much larger vision. So as I continue to talk to even some friends who are building in similar trajectories of online communities, I'm just like, hey, make sure that you're not only showing that what you've done today to grow this community, but what happens next? Like, what are you going to do with this community to activate other business models, to charge and ultimately make money and add value? So making money from this community is like really huge, right?
Well, let's talk about the sector itself and how it's evolving. Where do you see the industry going from here now that we're coming out of COVID and various stages of reopening? What do you think is going to happen next?
Yeah, I think now that we're coming out of COVID, I'm super bullish on the fact that many of the people who did not interact in an online manner, or they maybe didn't have an online presence, I feel like they are for sure fully bought in. And spun up. And we're seeing this with the fact of remote work. I mean, everyone just left San Francisco, right? And moved to Miami and LA and everywhere else. I think what's going to be super, super interesting is that after COVID, most of the money we spent doing a ton of things in person, we're going to notice those savings that we incurred during COVID by doing most of our things in a digital environment. And I say that to say, like, not only just like in our space of recruiting or careers or networking or interactions, I think just even during COVID, it's funny, like certain people were just like, wow, I'm not going out as much to dinner. Like I'm saving a ton of money by staying in the house. I think a lot of this, as many negative effects as there were for COVID, I think some of the positive effects we saw, we're going to carry over as lessons.
Right. And so what is the growth rate of the sector? How fast is it moving now?
I think it's booming. I mean, we see tons of companies raising money. I mentioned one of the largest was Hopin. Those guys are building an online community. And, many VCs are diving into their thesis around what online communities are and what they'll be. But I think we're only scratching the surface right now. I actually saw one community the other day where it was kind of like, it reminded me of a version of The Sims, which as a kid, I just nerded out over The Sims all the time, like a pseudo life, right? But I think what becomes really fascinating is how people begin to live in these online communities and what they're built for, right? I think there's just plenty of other environments we're going to see tap and open up in this space. And like dating, we already saw some versions of career fair things come and open up. I think there's going to be a ton of communities spin up, especially in the dating space. I'm like super bullish on that. It's going to happen.
So how many companies are engaged in it now?
On Hallo?
Well, in the sector itself, as far as online, how many you think are coming into it? Because this is a hot space, of course.
Yeah, I think it's a hot space. I'd say there's what we call the usual suspects, and then ones that are spinning up. I think here's the challenge here. I think a ton of communities are spinning up in places that we may not be looking directly at. I see, Twitter spinning up unique communities. Reddit's already been like, spinning up communities depending on what your flavor is. I would say there's at least 100 companies in this space that we're seeing like spin up different versions of online communities. There are like some bigger names that just come to mind when everyone's mentioning this topic. And I think there's around maybe 15. I saw one of the investors at Greylock, Corinne, she's awesome. She actually wrote a Medium piece about online event communities. We see tons of other investors like Alexis Ohanian's mention of online event communities and how they're the future. So we're seeing a lot of companies spin up here and a lot of investors take notice.
Great. And so what are the challenges in this space and bringing a company to market with it?
Right. I think most of the challenges I see that I'll speak on my own and I'll speak on others and then my own. The challenge I see others kind of making, especially when they're building communities, is not understanding the difference between growth and then engagement. So I think we see a ton of communities growing super quickly, and it's like growth at all costs. Like, oh, we have 1 million people signed up, but then the engagement is very, lackluster. And I think in building a community, you'd rather have, it's just like a concert, right? Artists always say, regardless if there's 1 or 10 people in the crowd, I'm going to perform and I'm going to do my best. I think that's an awesome thesis when you look at community as well, because those 10 people could be 10 super fans as long as they're engaged in what you're doing to go and recruit 10 other people, versus if, no one is actually engaged and they're just signing up to go to the concert, but they never actually show up. So I think that's like a break in the model. For us, when we were building our community initially, it was early. No one was actually thinking about this in this space. I talked to a ton of investors, so they'll probably laugh because it was like a thing with me. I'd be jumping on the table like, yeah, this is going to be a thing. And they're like, I don't think so. So I think for us, it was a lot around convincing folks who were very naturally accustomed to doing things in person to come online and do things. And that sounds really outlandish, right? Because we have Twitter, we have Facebook, but interacting in a live session, at one point was, people were like, why would I do that? Like, why would I ever do that? Why wouldn't I just go talk to this person in real time in face to face? But now it's a thing. And I guess I'm super thankful that it is a thing, because I was spent the earlier days of Hallo just trying to convince people that, digital communities were going to be a thing.
So how does Hallo fit into the landscape? Is it the premium supplier, the low cost? Where exactly do you fit?
I think the biggest thing for us is we always consider ourselves a premium supplier. And the reason being is, I can announce this now. We recently closed a pretty sizable deal with Apple. I think what's interesting here is that, we work with a ton of companies now. I think over 100 at Hallo, some of the biggest and some of the smallest. And we only want to work with companies who inherently believe what we believe. And I think it's an interesting space, and it's super sensitive right now where diversity is a big thing. And, companies are throwing tons of dollars at diverse recruiting and engaging with communities that are full of diverse people, minorities and women. I think what we believe, though, is that it's just not a one-off thing. And I think in the past, a ton of companies have felt their method to recruit diverse talent or engage with them was one thing, throw some money at a community and then kind of like set it and forget it. I'm pretty sure I stole that from an infomercial, set it and forget it. And I think that's a broken model, because that's not actually how you build a relationship. A relationship is built over a long course of time where you're consistently making effort and putting forth effort to engage and understand one person's needs, values, and wants, and the other person's needs, values, and wants. And once they align, after, sometimes years of engagement, there becomes a relationship there, and an authentic one. So for us at Hallo, we only work with companies who have a mission to say, yes, I want to attract more women in communities of women in STEM or gaming or wherever, but I'm going to make an effort to not just, lack of a better word, come there and check a box. We want to actually have you roll up your sleeves to do the work, to build a true, authentic relationship with this community. So yeah, we charge a premium for that, because we've been able to exclusively build relationships with over 1,225 universities to date.
And so what's the key value proposition here for the university, that why they choose your package over somebody else's?
Right. I think universities, what's really interesting is as we zoom out, especially in this digital landscape, I'll speak for the company and the university, and I'll kind of speak for them as one unit. Data is becoming so important to make decisions in the digital space. And I say that to say the reason it is becoming so important is because for a company, if you're doing events or engaging with communities online, you want to actually have data to understand what success looks like there. Where are you at today, and how do you measure where you're going in the future? So, for companies and universities alike, when they are building relationships in Hallo online communities and events, we actually provide them with data sets around, for the university, engage students, and then for a company, engage students from different universities around the US. I mean, you can actually, as a company, zoom out on Hallo and see how many universities you've engaged over the US over the course of a live event, and then dig all the way down into a specific university and break down things such as demographics, race, gender, even some data elements that students give, such as GPA. I think in digital space, marketing becomes so important for companies and universities, but marketing is very expensive and you need clear KPIs and metrics around your marketing efforts and why they should exist or they should not exist. And we're able to, one, set up that experience for you online, two, drive your engagement around these communities, but then also give you data to understand what worked and what did not. And that's a premium experience from our knowledge.
So what's the next step for Hallo? What are you going to do next?
Right. So we're just finishing up raising a round, which we'll likely announce soon. And then, we have a ton of stuff that we're about to build. I don't want to share too much, but I'm super interested in what happens next for younger generations. And I say younger generations because I just turned 31, so I feel old. Younger generations and how they actually live in these communities to interact and function. I think remote work is so huge now that like what happens when people may opt out of going to the office and how that exists for them to just have a work community that's fully digital. And I mentioned The Sims. So I think it's kind of where I'm going is like, how do you exist in an office space digitally and you do your work digitally, but you still have that kind of community effect of being at work?
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. Looking forward to seeing what you come up with on that. Well, in the last few minutes that we have, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I think the biggest thing for me, and I've been seeing in this space as I continue to I wouldn't say understand the space, but as I continue to do the research in this space is specifically for VCs and investors that are looking in the space, really take the time to understand the founders and why they're building these communities. I think Facebook is a great example of this. Right? It initially started off as one thing, and then as it scaled rapidly, it quickly transitioned into something different that we're all kind of like, Facebook's kind of different now. So I think it matters as we continue to spin up these communities that investors really understand who the founders are building this and their why, so that when they do rapidly scale, we don't see something that was supposed to be for a social good turn into like something very, very different. So
it's good advice. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
I'm super active on Twitter. I just post all my music on Twitter all day. So yeah, just my name on Twitter is Young Windbreaker, which I'll explain. It just doesn't even mean anything. I just like jackets a ton. So I just made it into the name.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, we'll put that in the show notes, and want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.